Hello and welcome everyone back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about something a little bit different, not quite Battletech, but still in the realm of mechs. As you can see by the title, we'll be talking about Double Zeta, and what I think about it being in the Origins timeline and how I think it deserves that kind of remake treatment. Of all the UC timeline, there is a consensus that Double Zeta is a black sheep in the lineup of otherwise fantastic shows. For all the things it gets right, it feels as if it was never completed as a whole product, more like a group of conceptions that ended up carrying the show off to heights like the previous entries and bizarre lows that are blatantly missing previous characters and storylines stone cold drop from the series, that feel as if they should be still very relevant to the immediate story. Rather than a proper conclusion to the events of Zeta, we have a show that leaves many narrative threads from the previous show untouched. Anyone who has done a cursory look into the production development of Double Zeta can have this question answered for them by pointing out to Char's counterattack and correctly stating that this basically gutted the second half of Double Zeta's production. Scrambling to fill the gap, we get the ending Double Zeta currently has. While not certainly a bad ending by any means, the potential for an Origin-style remake is begging to grace Double Zeta, fleshing out much-needed politicking and character motivation from not only the Federation side, but Char, Amuro, the Aeug, Karaba, the remnants of the Titans, Anaheim and all of their machinations. All of these are drop plot lines. While that could be decades off, I hope for a day when I can see it, as well as my precious GMs in modern, high-definition animation. I can't say for certain if my wish isn't already fulfilled in some manga shop somewhere that hasn't been translated into English from Japanese, but I imagine a commercially successful Universal Century Origins timeline for the post-One-Year War setting would be an inevitability. Based on the latest movies, I can assume I'll be proven correct, making Zeta's potential for being huge due to an Origins remake all but certain. In fact, for the sake of this video, I'll go ahead and say that Zeta does get the Origins treatment, and it is successful enough to spawn a Double Zeta Origins remake. And what could that look like? Based on the gorgeous animation and subtle storytelling of Hathaway's Flash, Unicorn, and Origins as it's been released thus far, a Double Zeta treatment would be extremely compelling in my opinion. The first Neo-Zeon War is as underdeveloped as it is interesting. The Titans can have more of a proper epilogue, as well as the show can keep the tonal whiplash of the first 15 episodes or so to an appropriate minimum, while still keeping the refreshing new characters and the later episodes' heavier focus on the philosophical future of space noids and new types. Also, of course, the criminally underdeveloped politics of the Federation and Anaheim in the original series. If done well, the Black Sheep of the Universal Century can become one of the most beloved entries in the series. Well, maybe except Moon Moon. I have no idea how to make that one work. But in terms of characters and mobile suits, Double Zeta has a compelling cast of heroes and villains. Recurring characters who arguably should have been in Zeta appear here. Set pieces and political intrigue with the potential for really juicy and great storytelling are also layered throughout the show here, and some landing extremely well, with others making choices that are questionable. Not getting into specifics because Double Zeta, in its original format, is worth watching on its own, but an Origins treatment for Double Zeta can clear up the muddled or uncertain character dynamics that seem to be lost in translation, or just half-baked because of time and budget constraints. As well as a certain problem that Zeta has, as well as Double Zeta, the Origins remake can get a sense of that scale and size of the conflict, instead of it all seeming as if it's just one war following one ship, with only the Gundam team being the belligerents on the Aeug, Karaba, or Federation sides. As I was writing and editing this video, I figured I would also throw in a cursory review and thoughts on the original Double Zeta in general. I like this show, but mostly for its conceptions and what it is trying to do, and ultimately its legacy on the later franchise in general, rather than anything that the show did itself specifically. Although the show, as stated before, has some amazing set pieces that, while maybe absurd, make for fantastic visuals. The new cast is for the most part strong in their characterization, Early on, Mondo and Beecher really get on my nerves, and you kind of wonder why they aren't shot for treason or desertion, but the explanation is ultimately the tonal whiplash of the first half and the reminder that it is a kid's show. And they do clearly abandon that about halfway through the run of the show because the ratings clearly seem to have been falling. And in the second half of the continuation, they pretty much pick up about half of Zeta's plot lines, and that's generous. It's about more like 40% of Zeta's plot lines. But even then, what was there is worth watching, and certainly by the second half you get a strong sense of the plot moving forward. The scope is just so laser-focused, it seems that as if this war is revolving around a bunch of teenagers, which is of course absurd, but the show really could have used some breathing room, and following a few more characters, even briefly, could have been a massive help, and especially characters in Anaheim and the Federation. However, Neo Zeon has many great characters, Earthside and out in Axis space, and they feel like a real threat. Haman Khan has some swanky-looking new mobile suits, and the cyber new types are half Best Girls and half Red Flag battalions. Hell, even their regular new types in the Axis Zeon are crazy bastards, as well as ace pilots. But the stars of the show really do come into their own, as a solid Gundam team. Both L and Ru are fantastic pilots and make great support for Judo. Lino is a criminally underdeveloped member of the cast and one of the show's great lost opportunities in my opinion. Mondo and Beecha, but especially Beecha, become far less annoying and become really solid crewmates and mobile suit pilots in their own rights. Outside of Moon Moon and maybe Shangri-La, the show has strong settings and interesting enough characters to see you through each individual episode. And Shangri-La honestly isn't bad, but the way less severe tone and an initial bad taste in your mouth given the new cast's irreverence for the machines and Grips War as a whole, making them seem very disrespectful to the previously, beloved cast of Zeta who just got, as you would know, blown up into a million bits about 2 or 3 episodes ago. So seeing a bunch of junkyard kids talking smack and planning to sell off the main mobile suit from the last series comes off as a little disrespectful. But coming off of what initially I thought was a bad first impression, this new crew really comes into their own, and Judo especially might be my favorite protagonist out of them all. He isn't a weirdo like Amuro, he's not a violent troubled teen like our beloved Camille, he is a normal kid who's adventurous, loyal, and always looking out for his sister in one of the most normal and wholesome relationships in the franchise. He is out to take care of his people, and politics never entered into his thinking, until the show forces him into a position no man his age should be going through. And he also has an instinct and drive that seems to make him a natural at espionage, and you can call this new type shenanigans and all that, but he certainly is one of the most active protagonists outside of his mix. While there are many defects to the show that stop it from being the Deep Space Nine of Gundam Universal Century, it is absolutely worth watching. For me personally, as I finished Double Zeta, I was left pondering many questions as I was finishing up the final episode. Most of those questions were answered within a cursory look into its production. Char's counterattack, as much as I personally love it, sealed the fate of the later half of Double Zeta, with basically giving it no answers to many of the questions for Zeta. It leaves you at the ending of Double Zeta with a sense of, that's it? That's all? Especially with the characters revealed at the end, who I won't spoil here. And of course, the characters who were left out of the narrative that you would know about, namely Amuro and Char, completely gutting the later half's narrative. An Origins remake of this show can not only answer and correct all of those stated issues above, but potentially launch Double Zeta into a must-see series that fills the gap of the Universal Century's years 86 through 95 in a satisfactory way without it feeling like a pure void from the epilogue of Double Zeta to the start of Char's counterattack. I know there may be a manga and supplementary material that fills the gap between then, but if it exists, I really haven't heard of it. So for me, an Origins remake is probably the best options for new fans. Not that we would ever see it until the year 2030. Alright everyone, that's it for the video today. I'd like to thank everyone for sticking around and watching. I hope you like and subscribe and leave a comment. This is a video that took a little bit longer and kind of blew up bigger than I expected, but I think it ended up being really well. I hope to make more content like this in the future, and just thank y'all again.